Hi everyone. Today we're correcting workbook page 147 when you had to compare fractions. Number 1 in your workbook was less than. 3/8 is less than 5/8. Number 2, 1/2 is less than 6/8. So that the open mouth should have went to the 6/8. Number 3, 1/5 is less than 4/5. So the open mouth went to the 4/5. Number 4, 7/8 was greater than 3/8. So the open mouth goes to the 7/8. Number 5, 3/8 is greater than 1/4, 1/6. 5/6 is greater than 2/3. Number 7, 3/4 is greater than 7/8. Number 8, 1/6 is less than 2/3. Number 9, you had to do a story problem where it was comparing two fractions, 6/10 and 4/10. So 6/10 is greater than 4/10, so it's class A. Number 10, the two fractions were 2/5 and 3/5. 2/5 is less than 3/5, so the answer is PEG, P-E-G. Okay, let's look at your textbook for today. If you need to get it, please pause the video and get it and turn to page 394 in your textbook. Today's lesson, you also need to be using your fraction strips or page 386 in your textbook. You also need that. Please get that sheet. Today's lesson is about ordering fractions. And to order fractions, you kind of have to know how to compare fractions. That's what we did for yesterday's lesson. So today we are working on ordering fractions, and that you have to kind of compare them to be able to order them. So you have to decide which one is larger to smallest, or biggest to smallest, or largest to smallest, or smallest to biggest. So you have to arrange it depending on what it says to you. So let's go ahead and look on page 394, and let's look at the example that it provides for you. So it wants you to order the two fractions, 2/3, 3/6, and 5/6. So two of those fractions have the same denominator, the same bottom number, but one has a different denominator. So you have to look at the same size strip and section it into those many pieces to be able to determine what one is largest to smallest. So if you look at step 1, it broke it into the 3 parts, and it has 2 of those 3 parts shaded. That's your first fraction, 2/3. Step 2, it breaks it into the 6 parts, and it shades 1, 3 out of the 6. That's your 3/6 fraction. And it shades 5 out of the 6 parts. That's the third fraction. So you can see whether it's cut into thirds or sixths, those strips in step 1 and 2 on 394 are the same size. The pieces are different, but the actual strip, the whole, is the same size. So each whole is the same size, but the pieces that are broken into it are the different sizes. So the whole is the same. So you can determine by just looking at the picture whether 2/3 is the largest, 5/6, or 3/6 is the largest. So it wants you to order them let's do from smallest to largest. So the smallest one you can see by looking at those 3 strips in step 1 and step 2, the smallest part that you would have shaded, so the smallest fraction would be the 3/6. So that would be the smallest. That would be the one you put first. 3/6. The second, the middle one, the one you don't have the most of, but it's not the smallest either, the second one would be the thirds, the 2/3. It's larger than the 3/6, but it's not as large because the largest one is the 5/6. It's not as large as 5/6. So this would be the correct order to order the fractions. Let's look at page 395 and let's look at number 1, the problems. So you'll need to get a piece of paper if you haven't done that yet for your math problems in your textbook. So number 1, you're going to order from least to greatest. That means smallest to largest. In your textbook, that is the direction that it gives you. And it says to use your fraction strips. So number 1, the denominators are all the same. The denominators all are 10. So each of those 3 fractions have the same size pieces. So since the denominator is the same, you can look at the numerator, the top number. So 7/10, 4/10, and 8/10, you can just look at the top number, so because the bottom number is the same. It's going to be the same size pieces. So if you have 7 pieces, 4 pieces, or 8 pieces, which one do you have the least of? Well, it would be the 4 pieces. So 4 out of 10, number 1, 4 out of 10 is the smallest. That one would be the least. You write that first. The second, now you have 7 pieces or 8 pieces. 7 would be the middle one, 7 out of 10. And then the largest would be 8 out of 10, because that one has the most of the same size pieces. Number 2, this one has different size pieces. It has 8 pieces into your whole, and it has 4 pieces into the whole. So those are going to be big pieces, bigger pieces, than some are going to be smaller pieces. So you have to kind of look at your fraction strips for this one. So let's go and look at the fraction strips. 5/8, 1/4, and 7/8. Right away you're going to know that if you look at 5/8 and 7/8, 5/8 is going to be bigger than the 7/8, but we have to compare for the 1 over the 4. So let's take a look at that. So it gives you, it has 1 out of the 4, and let's go down to the 8ths. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 8ths. That's definitely larger than the 1/4. And also, let's look at the 7/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's also definitely bigger than the 1/4. So the 8ths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Both of those are bigger than the 1/4. So 1/4 is going to be the least. So you're going to list that one first for number 2. That is the smallest part. That is the least. 1/4 would be first. Then, since the next 2, we said, had the same denominator, they had the same size pieces, you can just look at the top number, the numerator, to decide which one is smaller and larger. So 5 pieces is going to be smaller than the 7 pieces. So that's how you figure out your order for those 2. Let's move on to number 3. This one also has different sized pieces for the whole. 1/2, 1/8, 1/4. Let's go back to the fraction strips. Or I'm just going to draw a picture up here. You can look at your fraction strips, or we can look at the picture. 1 is going to be 1/2. So this part is going to be colored in. This one is going to be 1/8. So we need it in 8 pieces. So one of these little ones. And then the next fraction is 1/4. So these are the fractions as in a picture to compare them. So you can see the circles are about the same. I can't really draw them exactly, but they have to be very similar if you draw them. The fraction strips on your paper are exactly the same. So looking at these, from least to greatest, we can determine that the 1/8 is definitely the smaller. That's the smallest section. 1 out of 8 is the smallest. The next one would be 1/4 and 1/2. Well, you can determine that 1/4 is definitely a lower amount than 1/2. So it's 1/8, 1/4, or sorry, 1/8, 1/4, 1/2. That would be the order. Also, another way you could look at number 3 is we talked about how if you have a whole pie and it's your favorite pie, cake, ice cream, if you cut it into less pieces, you're going to have a bigger amount. So we could also determine it with that also. We cut it a whole into 8 pieces, or we could cut one into 4 pieces, or we cut one into 2 pieces. 1/8 of it, because our numerators are the same, we can look at them that way also. Number 4. Nine tenths, 1/2, 1/5. Let's look at your fraction strips again. I'll show you how to do that on the fraction strips. Okay, so you're going to have 1/2, 1/5. So you can see that 1/5 is definitely smaller than the 1/2. Now let's determine for the 9 tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can see 9 tenths is definitely bigger than 1/2, and it's definitely bigger than the 1/5. So you can see by looking at 1/5, 1/2, and 9 tenths, the order you should put them. The smallest one is 1/5. That's the least. The next one, 1/2. The largest is 9 tenths. So number 4, the order goes 1/5, 1/2, 9 tenths. Okay, now let's look at number 5. One half, 3/8, 1/4. Let's look at your fraction strips again. 1/2, 3/8, 1, 2, 3. Well, that's definitely smaller than the 1/2 because there's the 1/2 and this was down here. And 1/4. So 1/4 is also smaller than 1/2, but let's compare it to the 3/8. 1, 2, 3. It's bigger than the 1/4. So 1/4 is the smallest. 3/8 is smaller than 1/2. So you can see that your 1/4 is first. Then your 1/2, or let's see, sorry, I forgot the order. 3/8, right? Yes, 3/8. And then 1/2. Number 6. Let's do this one, and then I'll have you do a few on your own before you find out the answers. Number 6. 3/4, 1/2, and 1/8. Let's look at the friction strips, and then I'll draw pictures so you can look at it that way again also. Sorry. All right, fraction strips. 3 out of 4. 1, 2, 3. 1/2. So 1/2 is definitely smaller than 3/4. And then 1/8. That is definitely smaller than the 3/4 and the 1/2. So let's order them. 1/8 is the smallest. 1/2 is next. And then 3 out of your 4 is the largest. Okay, I would like you to pause the video and try 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 using your fraction strips. We can also, go ahead and try that. I was going to draw a picture, but we'll draw some of them for the ones you do. So go ahead and pause the video and try 7 through 12, and then you can check your answers when you're completed. Okay, number 7. Let's order those fractions. So number 7, you should have gotten, this is the order you should have gotten them. 4/5 is the least. 3/5, and then 1/5. Because you had to order them, the direction said from greatest to least, right? When we were doing them together earlier, it was from least to greatest in the directions. Now it was greatest to least. You have to make sure you read the directions. Number 8, 6/8, 3/8, and 1/4. Number 9, 7/10, 1/2, 4/10. Number 10, 7/8, 3/4, and 1/2. 11, 3/4, 1/2, and 2/8. And number 12, 9/10, 5/8, and 2/4. Okay, so hopefully you can figure out how to use those fraction strips. You can draw pictures if you need to. And hopefully the videos will help you. There's a YouTube video also for today to remind you how to compare those fractions using the fraction strip. And hopefully you can watch the videos from yesterday and the day before. And those will help you. Today you're doing page 148, ordering fractions. And you only really need to do the odds for practice. And we'll check those tomorrow. So see you then. Bye-bye.